Hi, friend. Welcome to the Big 4-0. It's Stephanie, and today I've got something a little special for you. I went and did a little bit of homework, so this bonus episode is kind of a love letter from me to the creative spark that so many people either discover or rediscover during their midlife transition. I was inspired to dig into this after the recent episode with Rose Planer and Jen Kakmar, who, despite being working moms of young kids during COVID, found the time, energy, and creativity to co author a book together. And don't worry if you haven't listened to that episode yet. It's not a prerequisite for being here, and there will be no quiz because this isn't so much a recap of that story as much as something I was inspired to investigate after talking to them. The act of writing a novel in the midst of professional burnout, parenting chaos, and a global pandemic isn't just impressive, it's astonishing. Jen and Rose showed us that even in survival mode, or maybe especially in survival mode, making art can be a way to make your way through. And that got me thinking. Over the years of having these conversations on the Big 4-0, I've noticed a few threads that run through different conversations, even when the stories themselves are wildly different. And one of those threads is this. Somewhere in the middle of all the midlife unraveling, burnout, grief, career shifts, identity crises, sometimes a creative impulse shows up. I've talked to people who started painting or writing or taken up playing music again. People who suddenly decided they had something to say and then finally gave themselves permission to say it. And when they did any of those things started to shift in their world. More than a few of the people I've talked to have experienced a creative awakening at midlife. So I was able to find about 9 or 10 stories that included this blossoming of creativity that doesn't include a couple of the stories coming up in the next few weeks and months. Just wait until you hear from the woman who took up Argentine tango in her 40s and recently competed in a national competition. And several of my very recent guests have shared midlife transitions that included either a creative awakening or a return to something artistic or expressive from earlier in their lives. You may remember in episode 124 that Francesca Montijo left a quote unquote acceptable career to pursue her dream of leading culinary tours in Italy. So her midlife transition was about finally giving herself permission to follow her own dream and do something joyful and adventurous and rooted in creativity and culture. And then Steve Vincent in episode 123 rediscovered joy and purpose by embracing a more creative and flexible life after years of corporate rigidity. Here's what he said.
I just had this feeling that, is this all there is? And if I can swear, this shit ain't working for me anymore. And the thing was, though, looking back for years and years and years, I ignored that and I pushed it down. I was a vice principal,
Right.
big school, 1,000 kids, 100 teachers, managing all of that stuff, right?
Sure.
It's a big, tough job. And so my mind was going, actually, no, it was probably my spirit was going, is that all there is to this life? Working in a school, how narrow, how restrictive. And it's almost like I have a little bit of a joke, when you work in an institution for a long time, you become institutionalized.
Yeah.
I could almost see that in colleagues. And the other thing that I saw, older teachers saying things like, oh, I've only got 3 years to retirement, can't wait. And I didn't want to be that guy living their life, counting down the days till I got out of something, right?
Yeah.
That whole energy it just didn't. There was one of those other things that were helping that rebellion. And I think I've always been good at English. I was good at English at school. If I reflect, I've written poetry probably on and off for all my life. And again, I've had this weird thing going on where I have these latent talents and they pop their head up, and I get a little bit scared of them, the creativity and so forth. And then I push them back down and I ignore them until, I don't know, something happens and I revisit them. And again, that was, looking back, that's been a mistake as well. Not embodying or embracing that fullness of all I am with my creativity.
But when I went looking back, I found a whole bunch of other stories that included a similar journey. And whenever I find something that a bunch of my guests have gone through, I like to try to dig through it and examine whether there's anything we can learn, whether it's common themes or patterns or benefits or whatever. We all know that midlife can feel like a breakdown for many of us, a crisis even. But sometimes it's also the time and place when we make a creative breakthrough. I have taken up several creative pursuits during midlife. When I turned 40, I took up aerial circus, like Cirque du Soleil, the stuff on the ribbons that you mostly see on America's Got Talent these days. Yeah, everyone around me was 15 or 20 years younger, way thinner, and lots stronger. But I didn't care. I was smitten. And it hurt a lot. But I didn't care about that either. I was captivated by the things that I could do in the air by creating certain knots and patterns with the fabrics. And if even one of you pokes me about this, I will post an old video to Instagram to prove it. But about 7 years after that, I took up stained glass, which my grandmother and an uncle on one side of the family and one of my aunts on the other side of the family all used to do when I was younger. Several of my most prized possessions are stained glass things that my grandmother made when I was in my teens and 20s. And I'd always wanted to do it and never really had the space or the time. And so I thought that if I ever had a home with the space for it, that's when I would take it up. And well, wouldn't you know, when I was 47, we moved into our house, and both the aunt and the uncle were ready to pass along their tools and supplies. And you can really read that as clean out their basements. But I got kind of a boost and also found some local classes. Heck, even the 40 Drinks project that I did to celebrate my 40th birthday was super creative. I'm telling you this so that you know that I know from personal experience that creativity can come to you in unexpected ways at midlife. So, I want to explore a few stories from past guests who answered the call to create and then look a little closer at how it helped them navigate grief or burnout or identity shifts and even help them rediscover joy. So, I'm going to try to weave together, creative pun intended, their stories to illustrate what creativity really means at this stage of life. And I'm going to try to distill a few themes that I was able to extrapolate from this group of conversations. Because sometimes when you think you need less on your plate, what you really need is something that's just yours. Something to focus on that doesn't have the high stake of kids or work or any of the other balls we keep in the air. Okay, a few things stood out from this group of conversations, and I'm going to pepper in a few clips from these old conversations so that you can sort of get the flavor in their own voices. First, nearly every guest who felt this creative spark described a period of upheaval, whether it was burnout or loss or grief or transition or emotional overload, that broke open a space for something new to emerge. Ryan Judd felt emotionally drained and unfulfilled despite professional success, which prompted him to shift from creating music for clinical applications to creating music for personal artistic expression. Here's what he said.
Just thought like, okay, I'm good at making this clinical stuff. I'm good at marketing it. There's a need. I've done it. And damn it, I want to make some art. I don't feel like an artist. I don't feel like I've done anything artistic and it contributed to humanity in that way. So I said, you know what? I don't give a damn if I can make a penny off this album. I'm going to create the music I want to listen to. And what I want to listen to is solo instrumental finger style nylon string guitar with a cello. You barely ever hear those two instruments paired together, but such an amazing synchronicity and symbiosis there between those two instruments. Just their range and the way they speak together. I found this beautiful cellist, and we created this album of music of just that solo guitar and cello. And I was like, okay, I can't just create this music. I have to get it out there. I feel like it's my duty, my spiritual duty, to get uncomfortable, face my insecurities, and put this music out to the world to try to help some people. No matter how difficult or challenging or what kind of self-defeating thoughts I might have, I really need to push through that.
Stephanie Rose was overloaded with major life milestones, all quickly in a row: marriage, motherhood, her own mom died. And she found herself asking, now what? And Joanne Morton left behind both New York City and her traditional job to live in a van and chase a mobile art project across the country after feeling super stifled in the life she had created. So if you're reeling from a loss, feeling burned out, or just feeling what I call the ick, like something in your life no longer fits and you can't figure out what it is, this midlife transition can sometimes break the shell of your old identity, which can create space for something new to grow. Second, many of these guests had been creatively inclined earlier in life, but had either dismissed it or deprioritized it for whatever reason, or they'd been afraid to fully claim it. Gregory Halpin always had creativity in his bones, but he suppressed it through party years and trauma responses until finally coming to a point where he felt like he could embrace it and really live it. Joanne Morton wanted to go to art school, but only declared herself a quote unquote artist at age 40, years after her original dream. Here's what she said.
I was always afraid to call myself an artist because I don't think I can draw. But a very wise woman friend of mine said, no, Joanne, you can draw. You just have to accept the way you draw. Game changer. So I was sort of embracing that. And I've always wanted to go to art school, but I ended up going to film school because I didn't have the courage or the confidence to do that. So that summer I was like, I'm an artist. I'm going to start calling myself an artist. And I'm studying the law of attraction and manifesting. So if I think it, feel it, take action, it will manifest. And I went back to New York after the summer, and I would say within 5 months, I had manifested an amazing art studio in Chinatown.
David Hankins had a very structured military career, but his post-retirement pivot to writing gave a voice to the parts of himself that he had left unexpressed for so long. So it can be really scary to say, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a musician, or even I'm a creative person. Hello, imposter syndrome. Especially if you've spent decades being or pretending to be something else. But it can also be really powerful to claim that for yourself. You don't have to be a professional at any of these things. You don't even have to be good at them to let that be part of who you are. All right, third point that came from these conversations. The creative awakening that my guests have gone through wasn't simply about making something. It was about making something that aligned with who they really were. Stephanie Rose used journaling and self-reflection to literally reconstruct her identity after motherhood and loss, and creativity became a route back to what she felt was her true self. Here's what she said.
I've had all these major events. These are the events that people planned for. And
Right.
These are the milestones in your life. I've had so many of them all pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
well, then like now what? Like most people, like they might have a gap between like having the kids and then like another like
Right.
identity shifting thing. So I went through all of these and I was really just like who am I? What in myself can I count on?
Ooh.
What do I really like? What makes me feel most like me? I always like own my sense of weird, but I don't think I was like celebrating it as much or making as much space for it. And
Okay.
so it became like this intentional look at like, who am I? What do I want? How do I want to shape this story going forward? And that's actually where The Artist's Way came in. That is the book by Julia Cameron. It's a creative journey. It was something that had been on my radar. I am creative, but I'm not an artist type thing. So, but an opportunity came up because I had been doing little things, and that was like the next turning point.
Steve Vincent felt like he was living a life that wasn't fully his. And so writing and storytelling became a way to reclaim his voice. So it's interesting that creativity, even though it feels like going out on a limb, can help us feel more like ourselves, not less. And this midlife transition from a bigger perspective really is all about returning to or becoming our most authentic selves. The fourth thing that came out of these conversations is that the work that these people were doing before midlife often had practical or professional value, but it lacked soul. And the transition to midlife also brought a reorientation to meaning. And meaning is another one of those larger themes around this midlife transition. Going back to Ryan Judd, he transitioned from an outcome driven therapeutic music meant to achieve a certain outcome to instrumental art that was soul nourishing. And he had little regard for its commercial success. Gregory Halpin moved from surviving his trauma and hiding in nightlife to creating beauty with intention. Here's what he said.
I would react to certain situations in a way that was too intense. So it clouded my judgment. It clouded anything that I could see. Or if I had moments of clarity where I made some really cool decisions and tried to pursue something, as soon as I got in there, let's say I started to go back into auditioning for shows and or creating my own work. And so when I did that, it started out great. As soon as I got really deeply into it, that's when anxiety would kick up, and that's when it would cause me to either quit, drop the ball, or just mess it up somehow. So yeah, the anxiety would just do that. It would force me to drop the ball, quit.
So I'm just trying to figure out like what's the difference between the things that were happening then and how things are happening now.
Oh my God, that's a good distinction to make. Absolutely. I guess it's just the receipts. I have receipts. I have like proof. I have like
the receipts.
Yeah, it's about the follow through. It's about following through, and no matter what kind of crap comes up in my head, in my heart, and my soul, that I'm working through, that I'm staying with the discomfort of it. I'm sitting with it, and I'm not letting that distract me. Whereas in my 20s and 30s, it would just be a constant cycle of starting something, dropping it, starting something, stopping it, because it just got too intense. Now I get uncomfortable. I sit with it. I let it be there, and I navigate it, and I put it into my work. And I didn't know how to do that before. So I have like a night of singing in New York City, just me and a piano. So that type of thing that I'm doing more of. The intention is to keep doing those so I can build something bigger, like doing a concert or doing something just on a grander scale. And coupled with that, I am developing a solo play that is autobiographical. I've been working on it for about a year, working with a coach and a special writing group. And so, yeah, and that's going to go to festivals and hopefully in Edinburgh, Scotland. So it's like I've never gotten this far in my performing life ever until like over the past several years. It's been truly amazing.
Can you see the shift here? These creative pursuits became ways to knit meaning, again with my creative puns, back into lives that had started to feel mechanical or empty or a little flat. I think for a lot of us, midlife invites a new kind of question, not just what am I doing, but why am I doing it? And finally, across the board, these creative awakenings required discomfort, claiming a new identity, starting from scratch, facing doubt, and making peace with the unknown. Most of those guests described some version of, I don't know where this will go, but I have to try, or I want to try, or I am compelled to try. And they had to let go of what everyone else thought and learn to trust their inner voice, sometimes for the first time. There's no syllabus for this. There's no program to follow, no guarantee it's going to work or be good or even make sense at first. But in each of these stories, they did it anyway. They started something and they let it be messy. So, if I were so bold as to weave this together into a framework for creative awakening, it might have 5 parts. Number 1, the crumble, the moment things fall apart or no longer feel sustainable. Number 2, the call, which is a recurring urge or whisper or forgotten passion that resurfaces. Number 3, I'll call the claiming, which is declaring yourself creative or ready, even in the face of doubt, or worthy. Number 4 would be the creation, making something tangible, even if it's terrible, that reflects who you are or who you want to be. And number 5, the expansion, which encompasses the growth or the healing or the new direction that emerges after you've set out in this endeavor. And don't think that I don't realize that this model can also be applied to the larger transition patterns too. It's something that I have been playing with, and I'm feeling like if I slide it in here in this subcategory of the midlife transition, it won't be as scary as announcing that I have built a framework, capital F, all worked out for the larger transition overall. See, creativity means taking risks, and I'm doing it, so you can too. All right, let's pull this all together and tie it up with a pretty little bow. If something has been tugging at you or calling for you, an old hobby, an old dream, a creative itch you can't quite name or make go away, I'm giving you permission to follow it. All you need to do is take a tiny action. You don't have to quit your job or publish a novel or do anything that you're going to show anyone. Just have to start. Maybe it's doodling during a meeting, taking a class, buying a cheap keyboard on Facebook Marketplace, or a tool or something to help you with your new endeavor. Pick up that camera again. Creativity in midlife doesn't have to be productive to be profound. It just has to mean something to you. So I'm wondering, is there anything that you used to love doing just for the joy of it? Or anything you've been wanting to pick up and try? Because trust me, it can't be any more ridiculous than an overweight, overeager, under-muscled 40-year-old trying to climb silk ribbons in a room full of lithe teens and 20-somethings. I promise. And if you're listening to this, it's probably your sign to obey the nudge to make something beautiful out of the messy middle. Thanks for being here with me today. I'll see you next time.